Fear doesn't arrive like a storm and then pass. It settles in. It becomes part of your breathing, your sleeping, your silences. That's what Stanislav told me, and once you hear how he's been living, you understand exactly what he means. Stanislav spent most of his adult life working toward one goal, becoming a judge. That was his world. Law, procedure, justice, structure. He was good at it, passionate about it, and completely committed to it. Then February 24, 2022 arrived, and everything he had built his life around became secondary to something far more urgent. He didn't have to go. Judges in Ukraine are exempt from military service. Nobody was forcing his hand. But Stanislav made a choice. He sent his family out of the country, walked away from the courtroom, and stepped into a reality that operated by entirely different rules. There's something almost impossible to convey about what the front actually looks like from the inside. We see news coverage, we read headlines, but the texture of daily life in a combat zone, the rhythm of it, the strange routines that form even in the middle of total chaos, that's something most of us never get close to understanding. I wanted to close that gap. That's the whole reason I sat down with him. In the Popasna region, the days had a pattern. Not a comforting one, but a pattern nonetheless. Around 9 or 10 in the morning, contact would begin. Enemy fighters pushing toward their position from 30, maybe 40 meters away. Both sides had learned each other's schedules with unsettling precision. Lunch for the opposing forces meant a temporary pause. Then the pressure returned. What made it worse wasn't just the volume of fire. It was the helplessness. Stanislav described watching artillery strike after artillery strike, Grad rockets, heavy cannons, ordnance he could identify but couldn't answer. We had a tank at long range, he told me. But we simply had no ammunition to respond to what we were seeing. You could report the position of a cannon. You could relay its coordinates. And then you just had to wait and hope someone else could reach it, because you couldn't. That feeling, seeing a threat clearly and being unable to stop it, followed him in other ways too. He watched people disappear. Not gradually, not with warning. One moment, a person is standing beside you. You're mid-conversation. And then they're gone. He told me that his mind refused to process it in real time. He kept talking, as though the person was still there. As though sheer stubbornness could rewrite what had just happened. His group commander died. Others came to fill positions, then left, then were replaced. Stanislav remained, until eventually even his position fell to the enemy the day after he was rotated out. When night came, it didn't bring relief. After 7 in the evening, the shelling shifted to white phosphorus over Popasna. Roads on fire. Asphalt burning. Brick buildings reduced to sustained flames. The town turning into something that looked less like a place people had lived and more like an open wound in the landscape. And through all of it, the soldiers found ways to stay human. They cracked jokes. They talked about their families. They smiled at each other, and Stanislav described those smiles with a weight I wasn't expecting. In normal life, he said, a smile is nothing. You barely notice it. But there, when any moment could be your last, someone smiling at you is an act of genuine kindness. It means something real. For the men who had children, drawings sent from home, small pieces of paper covered in crayon, would make them cry and laugh at the same time. These were grown men in a combat zone, undone by their kids' artwork. That detail has stayed with me. Stanislav is back in what people call civilian life now. He's in the Netherlands. He helps other Ukrainians navigate integration into a new country. By any external measure, he's out of the war. But he'll tell you plainly that there is no after the war for him. Not yet. Maybe not ever, at least not in the way people imagine it. He doesn't want to let his guard down. He doesn't want to relax into the distance. Not because he's incapable of it, but because he genuinely believes the moment people mentally check out from this conflict is the moment it gets worse for everyone. We live in war, he told me. We must live in war. Because if we don't, we will all die. That sounds extreme until you follow his logic, and then it becomes hard to argue with. He's not talking about personal trauma keeping him anchored to the past. He's talking about strategic reality. The war didn't begin as a Ukrainian problem, and it won't end as one. If the aggression isn't stopped in Ukraine, it continues. It spreads. The same momentum, the same methods, carried forward into other territories. Very soon, he said, the Ukrainians will run out. And then it becomes a European problem. And by then, it will already be too late for us. He brought up something that stuck with me, the historical parallel of trying to satisfy an aggressor with concessions, hoping that giving ground brings peace. The Second World War proved where that logic leads. And yet here we are, watching the same pattern play out. Weapons delivered in limited quantities. Restrictions on how they can be used. Decisions delayed while the ground situation shifts. Stanislav was assigned as a gunner on the front, with no artillery training. Assigned as a sniper, with no sniper rifle provided. The gap between what's needed and what's supplied is not an abstraction. It's the distance between surviving and not. He's not bitter about the support that has come. He's genuinely grateful, and he said so. Ukrainians who fled the country have been welcomed, housed, supported, and that matters enormously. But gratitude and urgency can exist at the same time. He wants people to understand that the calculus here is not complicated. Delayed decisions contribute directly to lives lost. That's the equation. There's no softer way to put it. When I asked him about peace, something that comes up constantly in international conversations, his answer reframed the entire question. Everyone wants peace, he said. The question is what you're willing to accept for it. He doesn't want peace that gives the other side time to regroup and return stronger. He wants a conclusion that actually sticks. That's not a warmongering position. That's someone who has watched truces exploited before and refuses to pretend otherwise. Here's what I keep coming back to. I was living abroad when a lot of this was unfolding, and I noticed something uncomfortable happening in myself. The further I was from it physically, the easier it became to think about other things. To fill my days with routines that had nothing to do with the war. And I know I wasn't alone in that. I've seen it in other Ukrainians living abroad too, this gradual softening of the connection to home, to identity, to what's still happening while we're having breakfast somewhere safe and warm. That bothers me deeply. Because if we're not keeping this conversation alive, if the people most directly connected to this conflict are the ones going quiet first, then we can't expect anyone else to stay loud about it. Identity isn't something that maintains itself automatically. It requires active participation. It requires choosing to stay connected even when disconnection is easier and more comfortable. For centuries, Ukrainians existed under forces that would have preferred them to disappear, culturally, politically, physically. And yet here we are. That survival wasn't accidental. It was the result of people refusing to let go of who they were, even when doing so would have made their lives simpler. That thread runs through everything Stanislav said to me. It runs through why he chose to go to the front when he didn't have to. It runs through why, even now, even in safety, he can't bring himself to mentally leave the war behind. I'm not saying everyone needs to be a soldier. But there are forms of fighting that don't require a weapon. Staying informed. Talking about this when it's inconvenient. Voting with this in mind. Not allowing the urgency to slowly drain out of the conversation just because time has passed and the news cycle has moved on. Stanislav's closing message was simple. Think about who you choose, he said. Think about what kind of world you're leaving behind, because children will inherit it. And then their children. The decisions made right now, or the decisions avoided right now, will shape what that looks like. That's not a political statement. That's a human one. If this story landed with you, share it. Keep the conversation going. It's one of the few things that costs nothing and means everything.